Look at that perfect timing. We are recording this, and so thanks for being a part of it. And I want to say a few things, and then I want to lead us in a simple time of prayer. And then I'm going to introduce my friend Sherry, and many of you consider her a friend as well. Um, uh, just this morning, I was meeting with a Christian leader, and he came to sit down with me for a time of spiritual direction. And he looked at me. First thing he said was, "Our world needs contemplative, reflective spirituality rooted in Jesus." It came from just this deep place of, this is what our world needs. And he said that, and then we entered into a time of reflective, contemplative listening to the Lord. And, our heart is to offer spaces where people can do that. And a huge part of that is the spiritual direction space. And so that's why it is very important for us to offer things like this today to support the work, the ministry of spiritual direction. And it's why we have things like our a Simple Pause app, which is all about creating space, offering space in a very tangible way for people to slow down um, and be with the Lord. So, as I said, Sherry, who's a good friend, is going to share with us and lead us in considering how the spiritual exercises of Ignatius can be a part of our practice. And we'll jump into that in a few moments. But I wanted to start with just going around the screen, just sharing your name and where you're logging in from. Just jump right in.
Harold Travilla, Chandler, Arizona.
Okay.
Luke Harris. I'm in Cave Creek, Arizona, just north of Phoenix.
Carolee Romansky, I'm in Phoenix.
Maureen Alianza, Phoenix, Arizona.
Hi, Maureen.
Krista Keene, and I'm up in Pine, Arizona.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Kathy
Joan
Nardi.
Webb.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Kathy Nardi from Tucson.
Welcome, Kathy.
Joan Webb from Chandler, Arizona.
Joan, welcome.
Thank you.
Debbie DiBernardi from Ahwatukee, Arizona.
Ahwatukee. It's just fun to say that city name.
Robbie Brooks from Phoenix, Arizona.
Welcome, Robbie.
Luann Roberson. It says Michael Roberson, but I'm Luann and I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona.
Thanks for clarifying that. We're welcome, Luann.
Stacy Kishbaugh from Tucson, Arizona.
Welcome, Stacy. Glad you're here.
Lucas
Deborah.
Boesma from the Netherlands.
Lucas, welcome.
Deborah Annabelle from Scottsdale, Arizona, but I'm tuning in from Kerrville, Texas.
All right. So you're SFSAZ, but right now you're SFS of Texas.
DX, yes.
Right. Welcome.
Debbie Sanders from Virginia.
Welcome, Debbie.
Justin Phillips from Bentonville, Arkansas.
SFSOZ is in the house.
I'm Art Matheny. I live in two places, Napa, California, and Waco, Texas, and I'm in Waco, Texas today. So coming in.
Welcome.
Jan Hassler from San Antonio, Texas.
Welcome, Jan. Good to see you.
Rhonda Jenkins from Oak Point, Texas, outside of Dallas.
Welcome.
Dawn, and I'm in Franklin, and I was wondering if there's anybody else in Tennessee.
Any other
Only
Tennessee?
my daughter and her family.
Well, welcome, Dawn, and we're praying that there would be some more connections and community for you there in Tennessee.
Yeah, I'd love that. I guess the Arkansas is the closest so far.
Yeah.
I'm Jolene Cook, originally from Arizona, but I live in Chattanooga.
All
So
right.
there you go.
Welcome, Jolene. Glad you're.
Can't have my video on though. My connection's weak. So
Okay. Welcome.
I'm Shelley and I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
All right. Welcome. Amish country. You have to let us know if a horse and buggy goes down the street while we're.
I'll let you know.
It happens. Just so you know, she has horse and buggies going down her street every day. Every day?
Yep,
Most days.
just about.
Yeah. You know what my first question was when she told me that? She's laughing. My first question was, who cleans up the poop? And she said, nobody. It just stays there. So it all sounds very idyllic and romantic until the nitty
Back
gritty.
to the earth it goes.
Yeah. I feel like, did we get everybody?
I'm Renee Clark and I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Welcome, Renee.
And I'm Kristen Blanford. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona too.
Hi, Todd.
And Scott.
Welcome, Kristen. Okay, I think that was everybody. All right. This is great. Thank you all for being a part of this time today. And so we did send out a PDF, and I think all of you got that. If you didn't get the PDF, it's a couple of pages. Just put that in the chat, and Beth, who did not introduce herself. Did you introduce yourself, Beth?
No, I did not, but I am Beth and I'm in Pine, Arizona.
Okay. And Beth is running the show today, basically. And so if you need a PDF and did not get one, just put it in the chat and she'll email it to you here shortly. So, and I have some guys that want to say hi. So you can say hi and then you got to go back to sleep. Okay. All right. See you, buddy. Go. Usually they behave, but right now they just want to jump in my lap. So I want to lead us in prayer. So just invite you to close your eyes or maybe just soften your gaze. Take a deep, slow breath. Notice your body. As your body sits in the chair or on the couch, or wherever you happen to be. Just take a moment and feel all of who you are, your body, also your mind and your heart. Settling into that place of restfulness that is our life in Christ. If you notice things in your awareness, whether in body or thoughts in your mind or a desire or an emotion, anything that might be distracting you, just invite you to release those things and return to rest. So, Father, Lord Jesus, Holy Spirit, we're grateful as we come together this afternoon. Lord, would you give us eyes to see and ears to hear you? May we be present to whatever might be on your heart for us. May we trust these moments to you. We thank you for Sherry and her willingness to join us and lead us in this time. I pray this in your name, for your glory. Amen. And so I want to introduce to you my friend Sherry Hudspeth, and many of you know her. For those of you who don't, she's been a spiritual director for almost 15 years. She trains spiritual directors. She has theological training from Fuller Seminary. She is the co-leader, co-founder of the Practice Collective. And I had forgotten about this, but I was looking up some bio information on you to make sure I had everything right. You used to be an accountant, which is just amazingly wonderful. An accountant turned spiritual director. I love it. So welcome, Sherry. So glad that you're here today, leading us in this time.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for inviting me. It is so wonderful to see so many people that I know and love, and to meet new people as well. And as I look at your faces, I'm also aware that some of you are currently in the exercises. Some of you are currently leading people in them, and some of you are discerning whether or not God is leading you towards being a spiritual director that offers the spiritual exercises. And I'm just really glad that we can be together, like from all those different places, supporting one another in wherever God has us with the exercises. I certainly have been surprised that this has become such a significant part of my journey with God. I was first introduced to them when I was going through SELA, and also I had started a new job with an organization called Grafted Life. And the other members of the team had been deeply impacted by going through the spiritual exercises. And so I am so grateful that this has become more and more available to the Protestant community, and I'm excited to have this conversation together today and see what God helps us each notice in it. So I wanted to start out with some comments about what they are. I think of it as a manual or a prayer guide, a structure for getting to enter into the life of Christ in a lengthy, lots of time kind of a way. It was initially created when Ignatius was documenting his life with Jesus and how the Lord was forming his relationship with him. And as so often happens, what we experience is what we go on to offer. And so he started to invite other people into the journey that he had just been on with Jesus. And That all took place in around the 1500s, and it's credited as being a part of the Reformation that the Catholic Church experienced around the same time that the Protestant community was born, and it's amazing that it continues to this day to be something that people testify to being life-giving, life-changing, deepening of their relationship with Jesus and with the Trinity. So every time I think about these historical things, I marvel at all of that we're getting to participate in that even today. And it's helpful to know, just as you kind of get into the language of the different pieces of the exercises, that originally the experience was a 30-day prayer retreat where you prayed, 5 times throughout the day, and you had time with the spiritual director. It was a very focused experience. And as time went on, there were people even in Ignatius's day that weren't able to set aside 30 straight days for prayer. And so one of the versions of it is called the 19th annotation. And that is the one that I'm familiar with guiding other people in. It's typically around a 32-week process that people go through. It begins, if you want to line it up with the church calendar, it's something that typically starts around September and goes through into May. And it has, the beauty of that is that it lines up with Advent, it lines up with Lent and Easter, and living out the resurrection season after Easter. And I wanted to mention that one of the traditional aspects of going through the exercises is even before that 30-day period would begin, Ignatius really believed in a discernment process that would take place before you enter into the spiritual exercises. And that was because there was a noticing that if you're not rooted and grounded in the love of God, that first movement, or what's known as the first week of the exercises, can be a place that's actually, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of fear, there might be too much shame to actually enter into what's intended for that first movement. And I'll say a little bit more about that later. But that's one of the processes that I, as a spiritual director, sometimes find it difficult to remember or to value, like having conversations with directees who are considering entering into the process, and even practicing the prayers and doing them from a focus of love. The preparatory exercises are, in addition to focusing in on the love of God for you, also help you get into the rhythm or the structure of the prayer too, which it can also be a discernment piece for people that are wanting to do the exercises. Are they ready to live into a 45-minute to an hour-long prayer process each day with the Lord? And there are some resources that are available to help with that. My friend Dale Gish has created a book called Beloved, that is a guide that you could offer to a directee, and they could try it for a month or two and just be a part of the process of discerning if they're really feeling called by the Lord, and are they feeling ready and willing to participate in the exercises. So I did want to go ahead and name the 4 movements that are in addition to the preparatory exercises. So I'm going to read off the titles here. So the first week, or the first movement, is called Sin and Grace, Experiencing the Boundless Mercy of God. And that is something that is typically spent, like 4 of the full 32-week process would be spent in that theme. And the testimonies that come from the people that I have met with and who have shared their stories of going through the exercises is that this is one of their deepest encounters with grace that they have experienced, because they have been, soaking in the love of God prior to entering into these 4 weeks with the Lord. And then they're also being invited into a process that pays attention to sin and where is that coming from? In what way am I tempted to separate off from God and do things my own way? And to experience being with God in his grace. The spiritual exercises make lots of space for being present to God. And I think that's one of the reasons why the experience of grace, encounter with grace, happens in a really powerful way. And I also think it's a gift that God wants to give us. He wants us to know that in the midst of our sin, there is this boundless grace available to us. And then that sets the stage for then entering into the life of Christ. And so the second week, or the second movement, is called Accompany Jesus on Mission. And that's 12 weeks of the 32-week process. So you begin with the story of the conception of Jesus, and you follow him all the way up to the Holy Week. And I'm going to speak a little bit later about the various prayer processes that happen in these. So I'm going to move on to the third week, or the third movement, is being with Jesus in his suffering and savoring the grace of compassion. And this is 4 weeks of the 32-week process. What I've noticed about both the first week, the sin and grace movement, and the suffering set of weeks, that for many Protestants, they have not felt like they have taken such a deep dive into sin and suffering as is invited in the experience of going through the spiritual exercises. And it's one of the reasons why I believe being partnered by a spiritual director is such an important part of the journey, because resistance comes up, fear comes up. This doesn't feel like what I've been taught to pay attention to before comes up. There can be quite a bit of disorientation. And one of the gifts that a director brings to the process is knowing that it's a part of the process, knowing that God's at work in it, and helping them rest into what God is doing with them and for them as they go through the exercises. The fourth week, or the fourth movement, the last one, is called Experiencing the Joy and Sharing the Consolation of the Resurrection. And that is 6 weeks of the 32-week process. And when I was first introduced to this portion of it, someone made the comment to me that we need to learn how to live into the resurrection. That something about the significance of between the resurrection and the ascension of the Lord, the apostles learning to live into what has just happened, is something that takes time. And that is also a very different from my tradition as a Protestant. Like Easter's a one-day event and we move on. And so to be invited into a season of like embracing resurrection and like what that has meant, having just traveled through Lent, was it was new for me. And it's been an important thing to revisit again and again. I just wanted to say too that traditionally directees would meet with their spiritual director once a week in this 32-week process. I also know directors like myself who meet every other week. So there has been some flexibility in all of that. And that's also something that I would like to say, is that there are so many different versions of the spiritual exercises. Like it's been translated all these years, right? And Some versions of it stick very, very closely to the original intent, and some have felt some freedom to add things in or do it a little differently. And so, that's a part of the process, I think, is discerning what it is that God is calling you into in terms of participation in the spiritual exercises. Some people do it one-on-one with their spiritual director. Other people do it in a small group. And so there is lots of flexibility in how the exercises can be experienced. Something else I wanted to just make a comment about as well is that, why do people feel led into going through the exercises? Traditionally, it was used in the Jesuit community as a part of discerning their call into vocational ministry. It's also something that as Jesuits, they were invited to revisit at different times in their journey as a priest. And the same is true, I think, for lay people or Protestants, that sometimes people are drawn to it because they're in a significant vocational moment change. Sometimes it's a significant transition in life circumstances that's not specifically vocational. And other times it seems to be a calling into a deeper relationship with the Lord. And this just happens to be the structure that the Lord is inviting people to experience that in. And then quickly, I'll just share my journey with the exercises. So I was introduced to them, like I said, in around 2013. And I invited my friend Jody, who I've been prayer partners with at that point for probably about a decade. And Larry Warner had created a version of it. And I was aware that he had recommended don't do this alone. And so we did it together. But one of the huge gifts to me in that is that Jody wasn't a spiritual director and I was just newly trained as a spiritual director. And I would say about halfway through the 32-week process, I hit some resistance that I wasn't able to recognize or name. And what I've said about the rest of it is I kind of phoned it in. And if I'd had a spiritual director, somebody knowledgeable about the exercises with me, I think that would have been a different story for me. One of the beautiful things about it is that it really did plant seeds of curiosity for me around it. And it was around the prayer practices that you do. Like one of the reasons why it's called exercises is because you're basically exercising the discipline of all these prayer practices that are included. And so I wanted to list those off as well. They are sitting in the loving gaze of God, engagement with God through the practice of Lectio Divina or imaginative prayer, depending on the kind of passage that it is. Listening prayer, you take time every day to pause and listen to anything that the Lord might want to reveal to you in the passage or your interactions with him related to the passage. And then the prayer of examine once or twice a day, where you're reviewing what's happening with you and God, noticing what's happening internally, noticing what's happening with the Spirit, and interacting with the Lord. And then what other skill or exercise that you also participate in on a daily basis is watching for the grace. How is the grace of God showing up in my story today? So, like I said, the desire to experience the benefit of those prayer practices, because a lot of times people would share, what happens when you do imaginative prayer over a period of time, or what happens when you do the daily examine. those things were things that my soul was drawn to, but in particular, the examine I was very resistant to, and I didn't know why. So fast forward, or slow forward, Godspeed forward 5 years. I ended up in a major life change. My husband and I were relocating to Wisconsin, and in January, and in the fall of that year, I just got this restlessness in my soul that I couldn't explain. I would try to respond to it. I would try to enter into more prayer, and I was not able to. And so when I met with my spiritual director the first month in the new home, in the new place, she asked me, do you think the Lord's inviting you to go through the spiritual exercises? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what's going on, right? And I was so surprised, and at the same time, I was suddenly ready, because now I have all this space and time to be able to devote to it. And I also really love to share this. I ended up in a 15-month journey rather than a 9-month journey with the exercises. So one of the invitations is to let people follow the spirit and the pacing of it. And for some people, the support of a group and going through in 9 months is a perfect fit, but that's part of the discernment process that needs to happen before entering into it. Because for others, like me in that situation, that would not have been a great fit for me. Then fast forward, I gotta stop saying that. I don't like that phrase anymore. Forwarding to 2020, I was invited by my dear friend Lori Schultz, who I now partner with in at Practice Collective, to start piloting something that's called the Ignatian Journey. And the way that Lori experienced the exercises led her in a discernment process to create a version of the exercises that has spiritual formation content, poetry, Visio Divina, that for each week matches the traditional version of the exercises. And so without any training, any formal training in the exercises, but a pretty deep experience of it personally, I agreed to lead a small group with a handful of people that I had been leading in the past. We've moved back to Texas, so I was back in community with people that I'd known for a long time. And one thing led to another, and I found myself continuing to guide people in the exercises. And about a year and a half ago, I started to yearn for training. I had lived kind of with the tension of the fact that I wasn't trained, but as I prayed about it, I kept feeling permission that this was God was orchestrating it the way he was orchestrating it. But it would be good for me to enter into training. And I'm grateful for the way that ended up working out. I've done it through the Ignatian Center with Dale Gish. And I think my ability to take in the training has deeper because of my personal experience with both receiving it and leading others in it. So it's also just an interesting journey, because we don't normally in the West think about doing training. You know, training comes first and then you do, right? And so that's been an interesting journey for me to process with the Lord. Okay. Before I move into like questions for you to consider, does anybody have any comments you want to make on anything that I've shared? Okay, the questions to consider that we have for us here today are on the handout. There's 5 of them. Okay, the first one is, have I done the exercises? I really believe as a person, as a leader, as one who is led by others, that the place to lead from is the place of experience. Like the most authentic way to lead is from a place of experience. So that's probably the number one reason I'm asking you to consider that question. And one of the things that I think can be a bit confusing for spiritual directors about this is because we don't see ourselves as leaders. We see ourselves as the spirit is the leader. And I would say that the experience of the exercises, while it's largely that, there's also an element of leading. And it's partly because the structure itself leads you. So when I'm sitting with a directee that's not in the exercises, they're bringing whatever content has happened in their journey with the Lord since the last time we met, or what's happened that day that they're aware of and connected with. This is asking them to come and share with a director what it is that they have journaled about, what it is they've experienced specifically in the exercises. And so it's much more focused experience than traditional direction. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. And then number two is, do I have the time? One of the things that happens that kind of catches people by surprise when they start offering the spiritual exercises is that you're either making a weekly commitment or an every other week commitment to one person. And that adds up quickly if you're taking on 2 or 3 people as you're doing the exercises. So that can surprise people. So I wanted to bring that to our attention. And do I need training? And I would say that part of the discernment with that would be your comfort level with understanding how you were impacted by the movement of the exercises from beginning to end. How I think it was probably the 3rd time that I went through the exercises, once personally and twice as a facilitator of this close group I led, wanted to do it 2 years in a row. So same group for 2 years. It wasn't until that point that I started to be like, this is amazing how all this interconnects and how one movement leads to the next, and how the various prayers support the process in a way that's like really pivotal and needed. So again, it's a discernment question, because I certainly understand, my experience is God led me to do it for a bit before he invited me into training. The next one, 4, is, do I feel led to hold the extra shepherding that comes with guiding the exercises? Resistance is the first word that comes to mind. We're often resistant to our journey of sin. We're often, the next word that comes to mind is confused, disoriented. And I have experienced that this can happen in a pretty focused way for people, and also at a deeper, in a deeper way than they've experienced before, which can also leave them feeling a little, or like they need support, or they're like not sure they want to show up and actually talk about what happened in their prayer time, and to be aware of some of those dynamics that happen. And for me, there's been an extra level of energy that has gone into sitting with directees that are going through the exercises than in regular spiritual direction. And I can't totally name exactly why that's true, but it has been true. And so that's part of what I mean by the extra shepherding that goes into guiding the exercises. And I'd actually like to pause there. And for those of you that have guided people through, is there anything about that you would like to comment on? Yeah, go ahead. Carolyn.
I think for me, the difference in meeting with a spiritual directee or a retreatant in the exercises is that with a retreatant in the exercises, our calling is to actually be more directive quite frequently. And that is hard, right? Because you spend all your time trying, no, I'm not going to give advice. I'm not going to, but guiding someone, companioning someone through the spiritual exercise, that's actually one of Ignatius's requirements, is that we have to be discerning for them and offer exercises, offer certain passages of scripture and say, actually say, I want you to work on this before the next time we meet or sit with this with the Lord. So that's a tension there.
Yeah, Kelly, that brings up one of the other like exercises of the process is learning to do repetition. So the retreatants will be invited to do repetition throughout. And what that means is go back and notice what God was up to there and stay with the Lord there instead of constantly moving on. That was also like a very different posture for my soul to get used to, and was necessary to get used to be able to lovingly invite others into trusting that for themselves as well. Yeah. Any other comments?
I've also noticed as far as the energy, it's actually given me a little bit more freedom as far as how God's kind of put me together as far as facilitating the exercises. But I think a lot of that ability to help depth with people is the fact that I'm praying the graces every day also. In order. And right now I've got 2 individuals as well as what I call my small group Ignatian light group. So, sometimes the graces are going to be a combination, but I'm finding that praying the graces with and for my people, it's depth in me a little bit more too. And it opens up a different kind of sensitivity and energy when I meet with them. Where it's not like we're on the same page as much as maybe the same spiritual wavelength or something. And I find the freedom of going back, because we usually review the rules of discernment, both of them, especially the subtle ones, because I'm finding more of the mature people coming for the Ignatian exercises, and to always have the freedom to go back to talk about, well, where is that source and where is that movement taking us and where is the resistance? And it's a freedom where, because I like to teach, I really can't in spiritual direction always. But it gives me a little bit more freedom to touch on who I am. And I feel like God can use me in that way. But the energy, I think, comes from praying the graces for me.
Yeah. So that brings up another discernment piece for someone who's guiding the exercises is how is God asking me to track with them in my own prayer life for the year? And that's an additional responsibility that I don't have with my regular directees. And then the other thing I would say that I missed earlier is that some people are very drawn to this because they understand it as a school of discernment and they're wanting to grow in discernment. So that's another reason why people are drawn in. Other comments about what it's like to shepherd the exercises?
No, I had a question, not so much on what it's like to shepherd, but so I've never taken anyone through it, but you were just talking about the experience as a director and some of the resistance you come up with. Do you recommend, like, are you in supervision like we do in Sealer, or do you have other, like, how do you get support around that aspect as a director, not so much with the directee?
Yeah. So in the training program that I'm going through right now, I have a supervision as a part of it. I'm meeting with that trainer every month. And then also my supervisor that I meet with is also familiar with the exercises. So for me at this point, it would be important to, he also has led people, also participated in them. It's important for me to have a supervisor that understands, is oriented in the exercises as well. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah. Rhonda, did I see you raise your
Yeah.
hand?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say my experience with the exercises personally was transformative, to say the least. And I'm like the number, well, in this group, I probably can't claim to be the number one Big Nation exercises cheerleader, but I feel like that's me. And so for me, with people that I walked or companioned through the exercises, I have to be mindful that they, when they show or come with similar experiences that I might have had, and specifically in the preparatory weeks, understanding the love of God, accepting the love of God, really, clinging on to and receiving the love of God. And they want to move right into week one. And I know that that's maybe not, I mean, I actually have walked with somebody recently who did not want to stay there. He wanted to just keep moving. Just keep moving. I'm like, and to this day, we still meet. He's done with the exercises. We still meet, and he's still struggling with the whole
Maybe somebody logged off.
God's love. So
the
for me
screen jumped up.
personally, it's a really paying attention to the movements that I see in others that I don't want to project, my own experience on, but I just, yeah, that's the hardest part for me, honestly, when I see that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Number 5 on this list is, do I continue to meet with a current directee that are starting the exercises, or do I encourage them to meet with a director who has personal experience or training? So I haven't personally had this come up, but someone that I'm leading through a group experience of it recently met with their director and said, hey, I'm going through the exercises. And she, all of a sudden she was like, oh, I've been taught that I shouldn't guide you because I'm not, trained in this. Right. And so they had to pray through all of that together and discern whether or not it would be a good fit or not. And they discerned that she would look for a spiritual director that's familiar with the exercises to support the cohort experience that she's also going through. And so this always depends on the relationship and what you're willing to do in order to become familiar enough or willing to notice, hey, I think we've hit a place where I am not the best fit for you while you're going through the exercises, and discerning how to find them a different director for a season is the way I would look at it, and just encourage you to be mindful and even feel go through a process of being prepared for that question if it comes your way, if you don't feel led to companion someone who's going through the exercises. Okay, well, I think it's time for us to shift over into our small groups, and there's questions on the PDF for you. There's 3 questions, and so just ask you to divide up the time so that you all get to share your responses to those things. Ted, do you want to, or Beth? You're muted. I mean, yeah.
You. You're going to be placed in a group here in just a moment, and you know how the groups work. As far as when there's a minute out, there will be a countdown. We'll also send a message just saying, hey, you've got a couple more minutes. And you're going to have 25 minutes or till about 1:20 Arizona time. You can do the math. Yeah, we'll see you back here at about 20 after.
seen it. I don't remember why, but I did
Yeah.
receive it from somebody, and I think Laura's going to choose the same 10 weeks that Sustainable Faith chose
Yeah,
for
it seemed good.
I'm sorry, yeah.
It seemed good, yeah.
And Sustainable Faith is agreed to let people do our version. And they just pick out the weeks and are guided by somebody that we recommend, kind of thing. So that's like, there's so many different instructors, right? I think that's been a couple of instructors that's happened with. It's not the whole program deciding that, but
yeah.
I was thinking about, I actually looked into that book you recommended. And I mean, because I've already like touched on them with Sustainable Faith, do you think that would be a good book still for me to get, or
Larry Warner's version?
The Dale, the one that you mentioned.
Oh, Dale Gish, Beloved.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great focus on belovedness, and it also does a great job of helping you pray the structure, the 45-minute prayer structure that typically people do at the beginning of the day. Helps you know what it is. Welcome back, everybody. Are all the groups back in? Can we tell? That's
I think so.
okay, great. So we wanted to like just end our time of conversation together. Wanted to ask, like, what did you notice while we've been together? Or something that you feel like you want to take with you from this conversation? Either of those things.
I am just very impressed with Sherry, the material that you and your partner put together for the Ignatian. Just amazing. I thought, man, if I could have had an experience like that with the visuals and it's amazing.
Thank you. Ted, do you still have that book sitting right there? You show it to him. It's called The Ignatian Journey. There's 5 volumes, and they include the actual content of the Ignatian Adventure by Father O'Brien. And then they include images and poetry. They include articles from books that are formation books and Visio Divina items as well. And I'll go ahead and tell you the story of how the Ignatian journey came to be. Lori, probably about 10 plus years ago, was in a new relationship with a spiritual director. And she didn't know she was a spiritual director. And as we do, we started asking wondering questions. And they were questions that Lori hadn't ever encountered before and honestly didn't know quite how to answer initially. And so they came back together at another coffee date. And when another one of those questions came up, the spirit just used it to kind of break Lori wide open in a way she wasn't expecting or even longing for. And it brought just a flood of tears, and it brought disorientation and hunger. And so that sent her into a journey, a formation journey that lasted about a year. And at the end of that year, she was introduced to the spiritual exercises. And she was just like, oh my gosh, like this is familiar. Like I've been here before. And so she felt led to pull out her journal. And as she did, starting with the love of God, she could literally see on the pages of this journal that she had been through every movement in the order of the movements. And one thing led to another, and she felt called to partner the formation content with the exercises themselves. And so that was about a 2-year journey of her just sitting with the Lord and her computer and putting that together. And then since then, we've been piloting it and then offering it in various forms. We offer it in a cohort form where people gather for 4 times over the period of the 9 months and then have support in small groups with each other in between. We offer it one-on-one, and we offer it in small groups online or in person. And we have created a directory of spiritual directors and that other directors who also offer this version as well as other versions as well. And so we're just so grateful for the way the Lord keeps just organically, relationally spreading this option. So thank you for saying something about it, Carol. Okay, anything you're noticing, want to take with you from this conversation? The other thing I wanted to give space for is practical questions. Did it bring up questions you want to ask this group?
Well, I
will say that Rhonda Jenkins put the link to your material over in the chat because we talked about that. My question, I was intrigued by whether you could do this in a covert way, which you shared. Lori's story was that where you're taking people through it, but they don't realize they're going through it. I mean, and so that intrigues me is some people be intimidated to commit to a 9 months experience, but if you offer it in a very casual way, it can be done, it sounds like, since Lori experienced that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say that she didn't experience it as particularly casual. She experienced it as a pretty intense year. So that's interesting. I haven't thought about this before. So this is just brainstorming together, so to speak, and hoping the Lord is in it. But it is interesting that if you had people that were resistant to it being connected to Catholicism, I could see where the Lord might lead you to offer the Ignatian Journey without the companion book, the Ignatian Adventure, that is written by a Catholic priest. But I would really need some time to think through that and pray through that before I'd have a well-formed perspective on that.
Sherry, you did say something at one point about how you took a much longer period of time to go through this, a total of 15 months. So as if you're leading someone through it, if they're in a cohort, does that transfer to a one-on-one to finish it out if they're staying in that space for a while?
Yes. So if I was leading, one of the things that I'm very cognizant of when I begin a group is I do my best to convince them that what I want them to do is follow the pacing of the spirit and not the pacing of the content. And try to talk through even what might be hard for them about that. And also try to help them understand that when we come together in this small group, you're literally sharing whatever's going on between you and God between the last time we met. So it's very similar to spiritual direction in that way. And so they can be confident that we want to be with them where they're at, that they're not behind. And then at the end of the process, some people, what happens is the Lord kind of fast forwards them and they do end up going in the material at the pace of the rest of the group. They just don't stay in the life of Christ for the full 12 weeks or something like that might happen. But if that didn't happen and they stayed at a pace that was separate from the group, I would offer whether or not they wanted to continue meeting with me every couple of weeks past the end of the 9-month process. Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, because that was has been one of my resistances to the group is that when I lead people, the hurdles to adaptation that people might be going through, and there's some set sense that I should be at a pace. And so having that flexibility is helpful. I think there is a group dynamic that's helpful too, but not at the loss of the ability to adapt to where they might be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that opens up my mind to do group. I've done individual people, but I haven't been resistant to in group because of that. But that sounds like an adaptation and flexibility, as long as the pace of the spirit. Thanks. Thank you.
That's good. And I will say that one of the most encouraging and beautiful, and why I've been converted to being willing to do groups, because I do find groups that I don't know well, and starting into something like this a little intimidating and requires a lot of trust in the Lord for me to lean into wanting it to be a safe and holy and sacred experience for everyone in the group. That's one of the stressors that happens for me with brand new people. But watching the Lord help them see his grace in their own lives by witnessing his grace in another's life, happens over and over and over again. Excuse me. And the other thing that happens is that, sorry. The other thing that happens is that they experience the theme of the movement together in a way that is very supportive, and I feel like makes things possible that's harder when it's just you and the director, and it makes me marvel every single time.
Yeah, coming back to the pacing of the Lord, the pacing of the Spirit versus the pacing of the content. I think I've experienced the other side of it. Like the pacing of the content was helping me build a regular rhythm at a time on my calendar, a spot in my house that enabled more. Yeah, I suppose the self-discipline was never one of my main fruits of the Spirit, but over time it did become a lot more feeling the grace to be invited into a place. So it was kind of both, but more discipline for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great, Luke. And I think one of the things that the structure offers, because I didn't speak about that in the opening, but it's typically a 45-minute time of prayer, 30 to 45 minutes, typically in the morning. And there's 6 components to that prayer process. And that much structure for that long of time is typically very different from what they've normally been experiencing in their journey with the Lord. And so part of what you're doing as a spiritual director is just being with them in the awkwardness, the resistance, the will I ever get there? Like encouraging them to trust the Lord with, you'll eventually be able to settle in to what's going to be a good match for you and the Lord for this time, right? That you don't have to be living up to some standard. Again, you're learning how to trust the Spirit in this kind of prayer for this amount of time. Does anybody else want to offer any observations of walking with people in the exercises that could be an encouragement to everyone else?
Something I was able to go away and do the in residence. And there's a dynamic in that too. And I was doing I kind of had begun doing the retreat in everyday life. And then I was a pastor and the church closed. So out of that space, I had a couple months between jobs that I was able to do that. And there was a grace in both. And so when I guide people through, I often ask them up front if they could. We might go 9 months or a year, might go longer, just depends how long. But I ask them to have a 3-day retreat, and then I meet with them each day, and we do kind of the rhythm of a 4 or 5 hour prayer session laid out like in that. And I found that's been a beautiful cross pollination because both are great. They're excellent, but it just mixes it up a little bit. And I don't even care where they're at. I don't even care. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're at. If I'm not trying to make sure it's the transition between week 3 and 4 and anything like that. And it yeah, that's been a grace these last probably 3 years I've been doing that. And that's been a neat way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to piggyback on that. Art, that's what we were talking about in my group when I jumped out of the group by accident. But I have done that works especially well for the 3rd week, the suffering of Christ, because that's tough to do in everyday life. And so that's been really fruitful to be able to go on a retreat with a retreatant for that week 3, or at least part of the week 3. That's been really, they have expressed that I couldn't have done this at home, which is of course not true, but it is fruitful.
And I love the creativity and flexibility and inspiration that the Lord keeps inspiring each of us as we're guiding other people. I love that.
One of the things that this brings up as you're talking about the in-person is that's how the journey, the Ignatian journey that I experienced through Lori's material with Sybil Towner at the Springs in Indiana. So when I'll admit, I have a personal relationship with Sybil and have had one for a long time. For those of you who don't know her, she's one of a kind. And when I saw it come up that there was availability to do the Ignatian journey, and we would get to go to the Springs, their retreat, she and Dick's retreat center, 4 times in the course of 9 months. I was like, we could have been studying the book of, I don't know, Lamentations or something, and I probably still would have like gone. And so, because I was telling my group, Sherry, about when you and I used to meet in Wisconsin, when you lived in Wisconsin, you were doing the exercises at the time, I remember it, and you were talking about it very readily. And I was like, ugh, like, oh my gosh, what is that? I don't think I could do that. And so when this whole in-person cohort 4 times a year, meet on Zoom the other in between those times with your 3-person cohort, individual small group, and now Sherry and Lori are offering it in Texas, of course, because why not? There's a lovely place here. It's just, I'm like, yeah, that's the way to go, man. Just, it's meant for us individually, but in community, right? That's what God wants for us. A life transformation for the sake of others.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Rhonda. And one of the reasons why I appreciate it so much is that I really do appreciate the idea of discerning with people if they're ready. Like readiness, for some reason matters to me a lot. And I've also had God bring people to me at the last minute, and there's no time for that. And it's so obvious that it is what God has for them in this season. And they didn't even really know what it was that they were stepping into. Like, that's how not ready in the sense they were in terms of understanding what it was. But at the same time, when you hear the story, as you are going through the process with them, God had absolutely been making them ready for what the spiritual exercises are. And so, it's just interesting as spiritual directors to really want to honor wisdom and, slowness and discernment and all those things. And then also at times it just feels like things go at a different speed than that, and trusting God with that too is an interesting journey as a spiritual director.
Well, and we don't know necessarily what the Spirit of God has been doing for how many months prior, kind of like you and I. You planted that seed, and it took me 2.5 years before I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Yeah.
Hey, last call. Questions, observations? Great. Well, thank you all so much. It's been such a delight to be in this conversation together. It's such a joy to be with people who understand, have experience, curious about, wanting to follow the Lord as a spiritual director, and be in community with one another. And that is a joy. And I'm really grateful that we've had this time together. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Sherry. Didn't you all find this really helpful? I feel like whether you're just investigating, offering the exercises because you've benefited from them or you've been leading them. There's just so much richness from what you shared, Sherry. So thank you. Thank you, my friend. My older sister, my slightly older sister, I always like to say. She's my big sister, but she's only slightly older than me. We're both in our 50s, right?
Yep.
For now.
Right.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're gonna end just a few minutes early, and most of the time people don't complain about that. But if you have a complaint, let me know. But I just want to share a couple of things before I offer a final prayer, and it's that we're going to have a couple of spiritual director gatherings, of course, as we move into the new year, and one of them will be around the spiritual direction and the spiritual direction and the Enneagram. Just thinking through in spiritual direction, should we utilize the Enneagram? If we do, how can we do that in the best way? I think about what Carol Lee was saying about we don't want to be so directive to where we're saying you're a 14 on the Enneagram or whatever it might be. But how can we faithfully interact with the Enneagram? And David Wu, who many of you know, good friend, is going to lead us in that. We don't have a date yet. And he also has a very unique, I think, really helpful view on the Enneagram, seeing it as the virtues of Christ-likeness versus not versus, but as an alternative to the Enneagram of personality, which people are very, very familiar with. So that one's coming up. We may do something on spiritual direction and transition. What are the kind of things that we can pay attention to and notice as people are walking through times of transition? That's often something that very much comes up in the spiritual direction space. So just keep your eyes open as things come across the email or on the website about some of these things that are coming up. And then I'll share with you that we were hoping to do it this coming spring in 2026, but it's going to be spring of 2027. We're going to do a retreat for spiritual directors. And the retreat is going to be at a vineyard here in Arizona, just about an hour and a half north of here. And some of you are smiling and you're thinking, I like wine. Well, that'll be part of it, but we have someone that's going to come and share with us who has a whole ministry around the spirituality of the vineyard. And what can we learn about the seasons of the soul from the vineyard? So it'll be very much a relational time and an experiential time of deepening in our awareness and discernment of the seasons of the soul through the just living picture of a vineyard. So that's coming up spring of 2027. And just one other thing I'll throw out, if you are here local in Arizona on November 9th, we're having our annual celebration for the SFSAZ, and it's called Practicing the Pause, where we're going to have some local artists and musicians lead us in some reflective things around that biblical word of Selah, or pausing. And that being really a paradigm for what we're trying to do in formation ministry and spiritual direction, is offer pauses for people. So anyway, you can get all the information on the website. And if you'd like to be a part of that, it's our gift to you to just come and celebrate. We're gonna have some Mexican food. Did I say Mexican food? Yes, we're gonna have Mexican food. And let me just offer this final prayer as we close our time. This is from the Book of Common Prayer, part of the noonday prayer. Just invite you to enter into this prayer for just a moment. Oh God, you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are fixed on you. From returning in rest, we shall be delivered. In quietness and trust shall be our strength. Selah. And amen. Thanks, everybody. It was good to be with you. Blessings.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome.